All right. Welcome, folks. I see people are joining, so thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us, and welcome to the Ask Mayfield Anything series. Today, we're going to be talking about education and some of the challenges that the industry is facing around that. So as people are joining in, we have a panel here. We very much encourage questions, want to keep this as conversational as possible amongst as well as you in the audience. So if what we ask is that you use the Q&A function in the Zoom link there, so it helps us keep track of all the questions a lot better. So use the Q&A, not the chat feature. Really helps us out. Just make sure that we're able to see and answer your questions. So that's the biggest thing as we're going along. And again, and really enjoy your questions. So feel free to put them out there as they come up. So with that, we'll jump in, we'll kind of get things started off here. So for those of you who may not be familiar, my name is Ryan Mayfield, founder of Mayfield Renewables, and I founded the company back in 2007, and we are doing engineering consulting is a big part of what we do. So we have a team of engineers where we are working with developers and EPCs from project development all the way through to construction. And another part of the business that we work with is manufacturers work on product market fit. And so bringing those two parts of the industry together is really something that we focus in on. And something that's near and dear to my heart, something when I started the company I was doing right away, is education. And so this Ask Mayfield Anything series is a testament to that. We try and bring in really smart folks, talk about some of the top things going on in the industry, some things that are top of mind, and trying to help bring solutions to the industry. So we have that. We have short information on codes, and then one of the things, and I'll talk about this too at the end of the class, but one of the things I'm really excited about is offering some courses of our own. So we've started putting courses on our own website, be able to offer some education around codes and standards specifically to start with, and building up on that. So education is a big part of what we do, making energy storage, making the expertise accessible. And so that's a big part of why we're doing this and why we like to talk to you all. So with that, mention the smart folks that I like to talk to and bring in and be able to make accessible for you and the audience. And so today we're going to be talking about education as it relates to the solar and solar plus storage industry. So brought in 3 panelists today with differing viewpoints, and it's I think from our conversations getting prepared for this, it's been great. So first off, we have Richard Lawrence, Program Director at the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, IREC. Hopefully most of you are familiar with IREC. And Richard and I, we first met back when you were at NABCEP. And so going back a few years, and the program director, you're working a lot, I know, Richard, on around apprenticeship programs, bringing some of those requirements to light for the industry. So I guess, can you introduce yourself kind of and what your role is over there at IREC?
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. Glad to be here. As you said, program director. 2 main programs working on currently is the Apprenticeships in Clean Energy Network, which is a Department of Labor funded program. We serve as what's called the industry intermediary to help clean energy employers navigate, understand the apprenticeship system, implement registered apprenticeship training programs, or join existing registered apprenticeship programs to train people in a variety of occupations across the clean energy industry. And the other project I've been working on for a number of years now is the Solar Ready Veterans Network, which is a Department of Energy funded program to bring more veterans into the industry. So we've got a lot of resources on how to do that, and some programs that people can participate in terms of training some veterans or transitioning service members in-house, and getting them coming out of other training pipelines that are out there. So happy to help people with that. And that is what actually led us into the apprenticeships, is because veterans are able to access their GI Bill housing allowance while they're in a registered apprenticeship program. So we've been working on this for a number of years in that space, and really excited about how that's bringing some standardization to training across the industry.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah. And so we're going to talk, kind of dive into some of that apprenticeship stuff. I know I learned some stuff from you a while back, and then even during our calls, kind of what those requirements are. So, kind of tap into you there. So, next up, Dirk Hooley from Solve Energy, technical training manager. And Dirk, I know you started at Solve doing, technician, and kind of have grown up through the ranks. And so, yeah, can you kind of give us a little bit on, what you're doing at Solve, and what does that mean to be the technical training manager?
Yeah, so I started at Solve 8 years ago. Like you said, I was a solar tech level 1, which is the entry level position in the industry. I did work my way up through the field technician teams into operations management. And then recently, with the growth that our industry is experiencing, we identified a need to have full-time resources to build, maintain, and implement our training program for our field technicians. So that's the technical training manager role. Specifically, I work with O&M groups. Solve Energy has an EPC department, services department. So the perspective that I'll offer during this call will always be from the operations side. Once a plant is built, operational, that's where my mindset is. That's where my experience is. But in addition to what I do at Solve, I've joined several industry-wide advisory committees over this last year with common goals to develop training programs in our industry and kind of bring some cohesiveness to what multiple efforts are doing.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, those groups are, and we'll talk some. I know we'll talk some more about it, but we have some standards that are being developed, and I know that there's multiple groups and there's from multiple angles, and so I think that's one of the topics on the challenges aspect, and so we'll definitely touch on that, and give people an opportunity to know what's going on and maybe even get involved themselves. And then finally, we have Caro Fernandez, and Caro's return panelists on our series, so really appreciate your time, Caro. And AES Clean Energy is where Caro's at now. We only had a single line to attribute there, but on NEC code making panel, and just very involved in the industry. So I had the luck of being able to shadow Caro at the recent RE Plus, so got to listen to her ask the smartest questions of the entire week for folks. So yeah, Caro, why don't you introduce kind of yourself and what you're doing at AES?
Yeah, hi Ryan. It's so fun to be here again. At AES, I do something similar as Dirk. I'm the O&M, or Renewable Energy Technical Training Manager. And it has been wonderful to work with AES since March. I'm fairly new there, but in the past, I've started working in solar since 2009, and have worked as an installer, have worked as a designer, and since 2013 kept doing installations and design, but also inspections and working in commissioning. And all that time, always training. And so training is a big passion of mine. I'm really happy to be here talking about training and education. I have seen people develop over the decade of training, from when they get started to when they come back for continuing education, and see how careers develop and how training feeds back into people's lives. And it's a topic very dear to my heart.
Well, great. Well, thanks for joining all of you. And so let's, with that, we can jump in and, scaling the workforce, role of education and training is really what we're going to focus in on here, talking about today. And so kind of setting that stage, I don't think for anybody on the call, this is really new or breaking news for you. The development, the forecast here we have of deployed install capacity, that's what we're looking at, install capacity versus time. So we have, these projections going out to 2028 on this graph, and no surprise, this is growing quite rapidly. And this, of course, brings multiple strains on the industry. There's multiple challenges within the industry. And so scaling the workforce is one of those things. And being able to, try and bring people up to scale, and being able to, help get people trained up and making sure that we're installing, quality projects is what we're doing here. So this is the U.S. Development forecast is what we're looking at here on the screen. Okay, so this, Richard, we're going to start off kind of talking with you. A big thing that's been part of this growth and is expected to be part of this growth is, we have the Inflation Reduction Act right there, kind of first and foremost. And part in the light of education, training, things like that, there's some labor provisions. And so can you kind of give us that high level overview on what those labor provisions are and kind of what people on the call should be thinking about when we're looking at these IRA projects?
Yeah, the IRA has added, as you said, these labor provisions the first time that these have been connected to these tax credits, but often sort of any of these types of incentive programs that employers are looking to get. The main provisions you see there are some requirements around registered apprenticeship programs and also paying of prevailing wages. I can speak a lot more to the apprenticeship piece, but we'll mention the prevailing wage. So the apprenticeships are what an apprenticeship program is. Just start off with is a training program that is designed around an occupation to prepare somebody for a career in that field. We commonly think of apprenticeships associated with the construction trades. So, becoming an electrician, some of these other occupations like that, construction laborer, et cetera. And it's, a multi-year program. And in many ways, it's very similar to like a college degree program where you would study in that field, but it's more of an experiential program. You're learning on the job rather than as much in the classroom. They do combine that on-the-job training with some classroom training. To be registered, a program does need at least 144 hours of classroom training per year, in addition to that on-the-job training. And again, it's designed around an occupation, so it really starts there. So you have to look at what is the occupation you're training somebody in, and then that'll define sort of what you need to cover on the job and what you need to cover in the classroom in order to provide a well-rounded education around that. So the IRA requirements are that, and it's to get the full value of the tax credits, I should say that, and it's either the investment tax credit or the production tax credit, because there's kind of both those options for a little while under the IRA for solar. But if we talk about and both of them in this kind of same way, you can get 5 times the tax credits if you meet these requirements versus if you don't. So looking at like the ITC, that you can get a base tax credit of 6% of your project costs covered. If you don't meet these requirements, to get the full 30% of the project cost covered, you need to meet these requirements. What those requirements are they are specific to the construction phase of the project and the kind of manual labor of the person that's doing that work. So it says, it's not the foreman or anybody above that. It's not the engineers or designers, the administrative personnel. Those type of people are not required. It's really that manual hands-on labor that these requirements apply to. And what it says, you have to pay all of those people prevailing wages, and those prevailing wages are going to be set by typically at the local county level. You'll see that wage schedule. You'll find out what that is. So everyone on the project has to be paid that's doing that construction work has to be paid those prevailing wages. And then there's different levels of the apprenticeships that are required. So first, it has to be a registered apprenticeship program that is registered with the Department of Labor or a state-approved agency, apprenticeship agency. Roughly half the states, a little more than half the states, manage the apprenticeship system at the state level and have been approved by the Department of Labor to do that. and the other half of the states you register directly with Department of Labor. And what registration does is it says you've met the the standards or the regulations in place for running these types of training programs. And so lots of requirements around that. We can help people understand those options, understand those requirements, and also the options around apprenticeships. There's definitely some flexibility there for how those are done. But the requirements say that every contractor or subcontractor that has at least 4 employees does need to have at least 1 apprentice, and total labor hours performed, at least 15% of the labor hours need to be performed by an apprentice, a registered apprentice. So that's kind of the high level overview of that, of those requirements. Every contractor involved in that construction phase is going to have at least 1, and overall 15%. Starting next year. This year it's 12.5%, but we'll just talk about next year, 15%, and ongoing from that point. That is, again, in that occupation that they're going to be involved in. So your electricians, your laborers, your operating engineers that are operating the equipment. Actually, I should say the other big important piece is all 1 megawatt and up. So yes. There's an exemption for anything smaller than 1 megawatt. So the commercial and residentials, these do not apply. But that said, I said these requirements are for that manual labor and those big projects. But apprenticeships are really a great way to train somebody in all kinds of occupations, including residential labor type people, same type of occupations you'd see there, electrician, laborer, etc. But also in other staff as well. Apprenticeships can be used in a wide variety of occupations, including IT related occupations, your project managers, human resources people. You can really, there's over 1,000 occupations that have been approved to be able to train a program. So it's really just a great workforce development tool, helps create standardization across an industry too around those occupations and what's required to learn them.
So it's interesting. So the way I heard you kind of explaining it was talking about an apprenticeship requirement. And so we have to have a certain number of apprentices percentage on doing the work. But that would, it just basically, to be an apprentice, you have to be working under a license holder or somebody who is at a journey level. So it's almost a de facto way of requiring those folks to be on the job as well, which is, if I'm saying that right, because to be an apprentice, you have to be working under somebody with a license or with whatever that journey level. It may not always be a license, I guess, but so they're going to have to be on the job directing those folks, directing those apprentices. And so it's kind of trickles up, I guess you could say.
Yeah, a component of an apprenticeship program is a ratio of the number of apprentices to the number of journey persons or experienced persons. Some of these trades obviously, or some of these occupations don't have particular licensing requirements, but it's the employer's job to have a mentor, a supervisor who is skilled and knowledgeable in that occupation. That is, working with that person on a daily basis, learning those tasks, learning that job role. Right. So under the supervision of a mentor, yes.
Right. And which, we're talking about challenge, or we're going to get into some of these challenges, and that really could be a challenge, especially, if we're limited on those supervising level or whatever I always say licensed individuals, but I know that's not 100% accurate, but those that are at that journey level or higher. So if we, depending on what those ratios are, I've talked to our local folks, sometimes it's a 1-to-1 ratio or 2-to-1 ratio. So it's can be limiting in terms of, to get that percentage of those apprentices up, you have to have, a higher number of journey level people as well. So that just adds to kind of that complexity, I guess, and maybe that potential difficulty for folks.
Yeah, the ratios are definitely can be a limiting factor, particularly, you're looking at some of these programs, train an electrician is a 4-year process. And, the ratios in the construction trades in particular, it's hard to get more than a 1-to-1 ratio approved. And so, you've got one person supervising that person for 4 years. before you have that second person now who can supervise the next person.
Right.
And so, yeah, within the apprenticeship system, you can sort of determine who is qualified. It doesn't have to necessarily be a license, but they do need to be, I think it gets to a broader issue around the training is people to do this training, people to do that supervision. And there are skills that are needed, to do that, to be able to really show somebody the job and teach them. The apprenticeship system gives you a structured process. It says, okay, during this first year, first 6 months, whatever it is, we need to learn these things. And then in the next year, you're learning these things. So it gives you that framework, but you really do need to have that person supervising them and making sure that they've gone through those tasks and learned them.
Right. So great question came up. And so the question, I'll just read the question, is the apprenticeship requirement only for the solar portion of the job or the entire project? Say if it was a new build. And I think you touched on this when we were talking during our prep for this. And so, even if I understand it right, the general laborers, if you will, building the racking system, you use the example of building the fence. If that's, fence is part of the solar installation, or it's, putting there, then that's going to be a requirement.
Yeah, my understanding is it applies to the project costs that you were looking to get the tax incentive for. So.
There you go. Okay. Okay. That's, better way of saying that. Perfect. All right. Well, I know we have lots of other stuff to talk about, so I'm gonna move to the next slide here. And so again, some of those challenges with the rapid scaling, and kind of want to bring in the other voices here as well. And so we have this list of some of these challenges. We'll get into some ways of meeting those challenges here next. But during our conversations, with the four of us, safety was one of those things that came up first and foremost. And so, I'd love to hear, Dirk and Carl, from you, what that looks like for you, and kind of, that, getting folks, I mean, that's that's part of this whole thing, but the safety aspect, I'm just curious on kind of your perspective there.
Yeah, so going back to that opening slide of the capacity expectations over the coming years, that slide shows installed capacity expected, right? It's not what we have already installed. It's new installs. When you look at that slide, there's some years they're estimating like 45 gigawatts new installed capacity. So in our industry currently, we have trained people, we have trained technicians to run these facilities. But when you add 45 gigawatts, you're bringing in a lot of people from outside the industry that have not worked on solar before. They haven't worked in the field. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that they can perform their job safely. That's why safety is number one. To grow our industry, we have to collect people from other industries, right? Bring them into renewable energy, show them that the job opportunities are great, incentivize them to come to renewable energy, and then we have to train them. And safety is number one because it's a new industry for them, right?
Yeah, when I saw that initial graph, Dirk, I'm glad you mentioned it again. I think like that's the sum of all my fears right there. It's like that speed of growth is like, how are we going to do this? And I'm glad we're having this conversation of challenges and then also solutions, of course. When we talk about safety from the AS standpoint, it is number one priority. And when we think about like, yeah, it can be a priority, but how do we accomplish safety for all these new folks and existing folks as well? Because we're onboarding so fast. And like Dirk says, like people who have no relationship to PV, to solar or DC systems, but we're also hiring a lot of people that have experience in other areas, which to me are almost equally at risk, because there is being unsafe because you don't know, or you have no familiarity with the systems you're working on. And then there's a being unsafe because you're overconfident. And so both on the safety side from us is trying to help all new folks, whether they're experienced or not in other areas, understand the system. We can have standard operating procedures, but if these folks don't understand how to read those specific procedures because they maybe don't know that equipment or what it is doing in the field, then the SOP won't really help them. So in terms of training and education, the big challenge is helping people understand what it is they're reading, understand what it is that this completely new realm of equipment is or means in terms of safety. It's very, very different.
Yeah, and kind of one of the perspectives that I see there as well is, so you talk about bringing people in, outside the industry and even within, I'll kind of focus in on the electrical industry, electricians, folks that they do have electrical backgrounds, but Carl, you touched on it, on the DC side, they don't have the solar experience, they don't have the DC experience. And so kind of being able to get that knowledge is an important aspect. And then we have, some of these other things, asset performance, code compliance, the consumer protection and quality assurance, I think is, an important aspect. And so I think that gets into, Carl and Dirk, what you all are doing, especially the quality assurance or the operations and maintenance, making sure these systems are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. I guess the complexities around that, just getting people trained up. And so that kind of gets back into the licensing thing that I wanted to kind of bring that back to licensing. And I'm just kind of curious to hear from your perspective, getting those folks, how are you, is even, let me step back. When we talked about like the IRA stuff, that was, as Richard said, it's, focused on the construction side. And now, we have the operations and maintenance side of it as well, which is, rapidly growing. So every time we see those numbers grow, that just means that's more and more systems to operate and maintain. And so I guess I'm curious to hear on, those aspects, the qualified personnel from your, how you are seeing them come into the industry. How are you, training them and those kinds of things?
For us, it's been a combination of theory and practice, hands-on training, on-site training, and trying to lay the foundation of understanding the technology and the configurations of these systems, just doing both. And, as we're focusing on challenges here, I would say one of the key challenges in all those 3 points for us has been a big role played by manufacturers, their manuals. How do we operate the equipment without a really, really good, solid troubleshooting manual? Or that has been one of the big challenges in terms of asset performance, keeping things working. Well, once they start throwing errors that maybe are not clear on the manual, then you can have the smartest, most trained people out there and still not be able to reach that asset performance. So education and training challenge also comes from what we're receiving from manufacturers in terms of performance and installing it properly, which is part of the quality assurance part of it.
To add to that, we started our training program from ground zero. Like when we hire an entry-level person, we expect them to be entry-level, which means no prior experience, right? I know most other training programs I've seen around the industry are doing the same thing, which goes back to why safety is number one. But once a technician has proven that they can work safely, then they become a competent person for a task. Everybody needs to prove their competency prior to being self-sufficient performing a task. Once those competencies have been proven, then we begin to build more solar specific knowledge that helps the asset performance, helps plant performance. Technicians grow from there once they have a solid foundation of electrical understanding and PPE use and tooling. But like Carl said, it's technology is rapidly changing in our industry. The inverters and trackers that we used 5 years ago are, they're dinosaurs now. And it's hard to find support for the old technology, and the new technology that comes in there's, things happen on the fly, and we end up becoming very reactionary, which is not, it's not where we want to be. We want to be proactive in our approach, which is why a lot of people have started putting resources towards training and development. Creates more of a proactive atmosphere for the industry rather than a reactionary one.
And that's a great point, Dirk, and it's something that I think is probably worth touching on a little bit more, kind of the rapidly aging of our, and I don't know, that doesn't come out quite right, but not the aging of the systems, but the change in the technology. So for example, just even a transformer-based inverter. So if you send out a tech who's been in the industry for a couple of years, maybe they've quickly grown in the ranks and have proven to be a qualified person, or competent person, as you said. They may have never seen a transformer-based inverter and understand the differences between that and a non-isolated inverter, and kind of the operational differences, and why is there a fuse right there on the ground fault side, on the ground fault protection, and what does that mean, and how do I so there's a lot to it, I guess, and so I'm just curious how, I don't know if there's a great answer, but just how are you all approaching that? I'm making a presumption here that you're maintaining some of those older systems as well, so there's two aspects of, or multiple aspects of, getting people trained up.
Yeah, it's a hard balance, and it's not really on the manufacturers when it comes to the older equipment that's lacking in support. It's industry design. Like 1,000-volt inverters and utility scale, they don't exist anymore, because some of the new ones don't exist, right? Like if you go buy an inverter, it's a 1,500-volt inverter, and some of the most installed capacity on 1,000 volts are no longer, like, it's hard to find parts for now. It's been 5 or 6 years. So when we have new technicians that we're training, they get trained on the new equipment. They're most often going to a brand new facility. They're going to learn 1,500 volts, and they might relocate to an older facility, and now they got to learn a bipolar system, so negatively grounded. That's a whole, it kind of goes back to Caro's point about people that have skill sets that meet our needs, like a traditional electrician. Some of them haven't worked in power generation, and there's some different rules when both sides of your breaker, you can open your breaker and both sides can still be energized. Same thing with old equipment that functions in different manners than new equipment. It's very site specific when it comes to training, and it just goes back to proving competency before somebody is given the reins to perform tasks on their own.
I absolutely agree. It's one of those biggest challenges is, again, is getting back to understanding the systems, and to understand them, you must have worked on so many different ones, because they are so different. And some of our technicians are looking at a whole region full of all of the above, from a PV system with battery energy storage and to a bipolar inverter in another one, to string inverters for a large scale system in another one. And so they're overseeing all of these, and you enter as a completely new person, and how do you wrap your head around all of these differences? It's quite the challenge. I would say one of the ways to approach this is thinking about trying to teach people how to recognize root issues versus just symptoms, because some of these the issues we see are very symptomatic in terms of, well, you change a fuse. Yeah, teaching somebody how to change a fuse is easy, but understanding why that fuse blew in the first place, that's not as easy, and that takes a lot of time. Which, Ryan, I was just saying that one of the biggest challenges, I think, that it's not that we missed it here, it's just in all of these, is the time it takes to truly foster and nurture a training program, and to foster knowledge growth. All of these things, time is a huge challenge, and we just don't have that luxury in at the speed things are growing in PV. And
Right. No, and I think it's a great point, and it's something that, and again, this is, challenges and solutions, but the time required, and it takes just that. It takes time. And we look at that, going back to that first scale, and you see that hockey stick of a curve. We don't have the people, we don't have the time, and so it's how to rapidly do that. And there's some really critical things that are potentially getting missed. You talked about manufacturers and training, and taking the time for in-field people to do it. Things like making connectors seems like a simple thing, seems like it shouldn't, it's there's not a lot to it, it feels like, but it's such a critical piece, as we're seeing massive failures caused because of these poorly installed connectors. And it's kind of people can be trained, but it's taking the time, make sure you're trained right, and maybe getting retrained, make sure you didn't just miss that one step or something. So so I think that's an aspect. The time aspect is a important one that is hard for any of us to find and dedicate to. Cool. And then I think the last piece that we didn't really touch on, it kind of did touch on it a little bit, but this increased system complexity, we have, microgrids, energy storage systems, smart grids, all this stuff. And I think that also kind of touches back into, we could have rolled into the older stuff. I mean, it's the bipolar systems, things like that. Complexity in the sense of, it's not something that people are maybe necessarily seeing day in and day out, or on new installs. So I think those are all aspects in terms of the challenges. So
right.
Yeah.
Before you move on to the next one, Dirk briefly mentioned this, but I think it's one of the most important ones that encompasses all of these, which is balance. Dirk mentioned how do we keep the balance between all of these priorities, between prioritizing, well, the assets need to perform, but people need to stay safe, but we also need to hire thousands of people, but we also, it's so many of these things, like the challenges and so many balls in the air. Is that keyword that Dirk used was balance, how to find that balance, and that's company by company looking for how to balance all of these.
Sure. Yeah, and Tracy put a comment in here, and I think agree. The tricky part's when to start preparing people when you don't know when the jobs are going to start, and so part of it is getting ahead of that if you can, and that means that you have to put in you have to be investing in that, and putting the time and money and effort in doing that. So if that's something as a company you are doing and you're moving towards, then that's you can definitely be doing that. So that agreed, that is a tricky part, but using that time to get the training as well when they're not under the gun of getting those modules installed, getting those connectors installed, that's a great time to be trying to do that as well. All right. So let's talk a little bit on the solution side. There's, and the next slide, we're going to show some of the resources, some of the things, some of the folks that are out there doing some great work. But recruitment approaches, we have that, first and foremost here in terms of our bullets. And I know, Dirk, you had some things that Solve is trying to do, or is doing, I should say, in terms of finding qualified candidates. And I'm sure, Caro, you're up against that as well. And I think, Richard, you're probably talking with people who are doing it. So I guess, yeah, what is that approach? What are you doing to solve that internally?
So for Solve Energy, we deal with large scale utility projects, and they not generally building large scale utility projects around population centers. Right, they're finding desert land that is low cost and not being used, building large solar facilities there. So your recruitment pool to begin with in the area is smaller than you would like. And then when we start receiving applications for these jobs, we first and foremost hope that one of our experienced technicians would like to relocate for promotion, for career advancement opportunities to these new projects. But local people for large scale solar projects generally don't have experience. So it's the training program is the solution to qualifying your candidates. We look for people that have high level of character, they're reliable, they work independently, and they learn quickly. That's key. Those three things. We can teach you everything you need to know about the sun and electricity if you have a good foundation to start with. So yeah, our training program has been our answer to that question of how do we staff these projects in remote areas in an industry that's growing exponentially. Everyone that has experience in this industry is currently working at a great job. So it's the training program is our solution.
Sure. Okay, great. And Carl, I know you all are, faced with a similar challenge, and so, anything to add to that one?
Well, not much to add. I think Dirk covered exactly what we're going through too. Like the location of these sites is super remote and complicated to find trained workforce there. But there's a couple of other aspects in terms of recruitment one specific one that we're trying to address more directly is the reskilling, because as this industry is growing, others are becoming smaller. And at AES, there's a strong effort to reskill people from industries, specifically fossil fuel-based power plants, who have great knowledge, great skills, and trying to reskill them to try to not only recruit externally or recruit new people, but also reskill internally as things are shifting.
Yeah, no, that's a great point of, kind of the internal and the reskilling from, I guess, the other industries. Curious, Richard, I'm, thinking about some of the education, the apprenticeship side of things. I know you're not like in the apprenticeships and doing them or anything, but just kind of how are you seeing with your work at IREC, a buildup from the unions specifically or from the organized labor trying to address this? Is this something that you're getting more and more inquiries on? How are you seeing that from that side of the coin, getting built up?
Yeah, a lot of the trade unions have been involved in the industry for a long time, and we've another thing IREC does is our solar job census, which has consistently shown about 10% of the workforce has been unionized for a while. But yeah, this definitely, the apprenticeship requirements are driving, I'd say, more interest in the clean energy employers looking at labor unions as an option for meeting these growth challenges and finding, skilled people and obviously meeting the apprenticeship requirements. So it's, we say that's kind of the easy button to meet both those prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements that are in the IRA, and definitely the labor unions were instrumental in getting that Inflation Reduction Act passed with those requirements in it. So there's kind of a political thing there. But yeah, they are many of them are starting to are integrating renewable energies if they haven't already. But trade unions respond to the trade that they serve, so they really are responsive to the business partners that come in. The apprenticeship programs that involve unions are what are called joint programs. They are a joint between the labor and the management, or the trade association. So the contractors association that's a part of it. So you'll often see them run by joint apprenticeship training committees. Those committees are managed by both the contractors who need to do the work and the labor that is doing the work. And so it's they are definitely partnerships, and so trade unions are responsive to the employers that are engaging with them to meet their training needs, and can adjust the training that they deliver and how they deliver it to meet the needs, whether there's particular certifications that are required or or other things like that. Qualifications, when a contractor comes to that union and says, hey, we need these type of people, then it's that partnership to figure out how those that labor is found or developed, again, in partnership there. And I want to address a question too that is in the chat there. Getting solar focused apprenticeships approved. And it's not necessarily just that it's a labor union sort of heavy state, or one where you see that influence. The apprenticeship system in general is built around again, these occupations that you're training somebody in, and it starts with that occupation needs to be commonly recognized across an industry, and in order to say this is what we expect this person to be able to do, or at least these are the things that they need to learn in order to become a competent person in that occupation. And there is nationally there is not necessarily consensus. It definitely comes into the labor union saying, hey, this work is something that is done by these trades. Solar, the argument is solar is not quote an occupation on its own. It is something that's done by particular trades. There was recently a multi-trade agreement that was entered into where they divided out the labor, and they said, yeah, this type of this part of the project's done by the electrician, and this part of the project's done by the operating engineer. And I know from talking to them, some of the carpenters are not happy because they weren't included in that organization. But they say, hey, we can play a role on these projects too. But the point is that they don't recognize it necessarily as a new field, and so therefore there's not consensus. There's not a common recognition of sort of what it takes. Many of them say, hey, you've got to be an electrician if you're going to be doing anything with electrical work, and to be trained as an electrician, you need to be trained broadly on that. And so that lack of consensus has made it challenging to get any sort of solar specific occupations or any other clean energy industry. We don't have hydrogen specific occupations. You have pipe fitters and those types of trades. Same in wind. Although wind turbine technician is approved, but it is a maintenance position, not a construction occupation. So it starts with that consensus around what it is that what you need to be to be competent to do that work. There are some states that have approved some specific solar specific apprenticeship programs. And in those states, the things that we see are they have recognized that occupation in their licensing. So example, Oregon has a limited electrician license where they can install up to 50 kilowatts, all renewable energy systems. And then they, because they recognize that as an occupation commonly in that state, they now can have an apprenticeship program for that. We see that also in Florida. They have a licensed contractor. You can become a solar contractor. And so they recognize that in that state. And that contract covers both photovoltaics and solar hot water. So to become you need to learn both of those things if you go through an apprenticeship, and they've approved an apprenticeship program in that state. But outside of those areas, and those also, I should say, are both state apprenticeship agencies. So they have authority of the apprenticeship system in there too. So yeah, we don't expect to see many solar specific occupations, but you definitely can combine, like I said, laborer does a lot of the work on the job, can do a lot of the manual work, and then combination with an electrician coming in, and depending on the project, probably an operating engineer, and some of the other trades there, iron worker could be involved, something like that. But generally you have to look at those existing approved occupations, and that's what you can do an apprenticeship program for.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm in Oregon. I know the Oregon. I'm actually license holder number 4 of that license. So there's not a lot of us out there, but so I'm kind of familiar with that whole process. But it kind of brings up a point to everything you were just talking about around this consistency and standards, and I think also kind of wrapping in a kind of a comment or a question that came in from Kate about the apprenticeship programs, ensuring that people are properly trained. I think it gets into this consistency piece. And Dirk, we were talking about this as well. There's, again, I will show some folks that are doing some of this work on the next slide. But there's lots of organizations coming in and trying to set standards and set ANSI standards specifically around what some of this training looks like. And so the question that Kate asked was, how do we make sure that people are properly trained? I think a big part of this is that consistency. And when it comes to apprenticeship programs, there's really, there are, I guess, some things that you were saying there, Richard, is what struck me here is that, solar is not necessarily always considered a trade, or, it's doing the solar work, it fits into multiple trades. And so, getting the organized labor to somewhat, I guess, accept or, see solar as a viable thing and putting the time and effort into their apprenticeship programs. And so exciting to see that, that is being developed and you're seeing changes on that. And then, the whole consistency aspect, I think, is one of the most critical pieces.
Yeah, I want to throw in one thing on that too, is we are also working on some of that within the apprenticeships specifically, and trying to create it's called a national guideline standard. So it's a framework, a guideline that has been approved by the Department of Labor, that if you run your apprenticeship program in line with that it's going to be easier to get that approved. And so we are coordinating that effort to try to address this question of it is challenging for a solar installer who is only doing solar installation work to train an electrician to meet all of the skills that an electrician needs to learn. When you look at the electrician training standard that says, what's commonly agreed of what you need to do to learn to be an electrician, it is possible. There are programs that have been approved to do that. But, you look at it, it's like, whatever, it might have 800 hours of industrial motors and controls on there. And are you doing that if you're a residential solar contractor? Not necessarily. So the apprenticeship system does allow some flexibility there. It's called the 25% rule, where you can sort of modify the base standard by about 25%, both in terms of time, but also in terms of that content that's taught. There's going to be that 75% core content within that occupation that you do have to cover to be, to train somebody in that field. But then you have the employer has an ability to adjust that and customize it to meet their needs. And you think about this sort of, again, similar to a college training program. If you go to an engineering school, or even whatever, biology, any degree program, going to one school versus another school, you're going to have slightly different classwork depending on what that institution sort of has as their focus or what courses they offer. But you're going to have a common understanding when you graduate from either of those programs that you've covered a lot of that core fundamentals that's prepared you for that. In the solid basics, right? And that's similar with an apprenticeship program. So we're trying to create that standard that would say, okay, if you are a solar company, this is how you can actually train an electrician and cover all those aspects that you need to, or train a laborer, or some of these other job roles. We're also looking at the non-construction trades there. So, your designer or your customer service salesperson needs, we need a lot of training for those salespeople. That's a 1-year program. A salesperson is a 1-year program in the apprenticeship system, and we're excited to work on that one too.
Cool. So I think that's a great segue into kind of these education resources, and so we have quite the list here, I understand, and so I know that people on the call here are involved in some of these. We're all, I think, have a hand in some of these on some way or another. So of course there's ways of taking courses directly, things that we're doing. I mentioned earlier, we have our courses. SEI has been kind of the go-to resource for the industry in a lot of ways. And I know SEI, O&M specifically, they've working together. And Carl, you might be able to speak a little bit to that. I know that there's some stuff in process working on Amicus specifically, and they have, I believe it's been released, the kind of what the job descriptions and kind of what the what those levels are for different O&M techs, if I remember right, is what they're doing. And so there's a lot of stuff being built around that. I don't know, Carl, did I capture that well enough?
I think so. I think, well, there's just a couple of comments on how to read this list too. And it relates to the solutions we were trying to talk about in the previous one too, is there's internal and external solutions. And for most companies, these are the external solutions. And most of us, and I'm sure Dirk will agree, we don't want to become training entities. We don't want to become certifying entities or power plant or power production companies. And so we need to have internal training programs that are specific for our companies, but we also need to be able to rely on these external training providers that can really focus on that. And I think at AES, it's been wonderful to see how there's internal work being done and also support for external work that will not only serve a larger portion, but we know that we need to help build the workforce outside of AES as well, just because of what we see coming in the next 2, 5, 10 years. We just can't focus only on internal training.
Right.
And so it's wonderful to see such a complete list that we can help promote externally while also working internally. And just a quick comment on the internal solutions. I think one of the only ways to scale rapidly is to create like some kind of pyramid of knowledge where we try to just support existing employees who are extremely knowledgeable. I'm sure every company has them. We certainly have them, and trying to help them try to support in developing their mentoring abilities or their training abilities. So the training is happening at all times in the field, not just when training is happening. It just has to be ubiquitous in everything we do. We always have to be training people.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. And so go ahead, Dirk.
Oh, I was just gonna say that comment from Carl is spot on. At Solve, we have a slogan. It's called "Trainer Replacement." The growth of the industry, your opportunity to move on to a larger role within your company there's common, right? For individuals to come into the industry and move up rather quickly. So we always preach to our employees to train a replacement, to take someone under your wing. You might be a solar technician for 6 months, but there's a new hire coming in and you can teach them the knowledge you've gained in 6 months. Training doesn't just happen with the training team. It happens every single day.
Every day.
And every interaction from employee to another is potentially a training interaction. So appreciate Carl bringing that up. That's needs to be commonplace.
Yeah. No, I thank you both. That's really good input there. And so this list is by no means fully exhaustive, but we all came up with this pretty much together. And so there's things like SIA, putting together like those standards we talked about. So there's definitely a lot of work going in within the industry to helping address these workforce challenges. So as we're coming up on the top of the hour, kind of going to breeze through this, but talking about many of us are prioritizing education and training. The standardized solutions, which are in the works, are important. We talked a lot about the organized labor and the apprenticeship program, so I think that's going to be a big part of it. And then these standards that are being developed is a big going to be a big driver and a big help for us. So I wanted to make sure we get to this point, be able to put everybody's contact information up here. There are more questions and we're able to get to everything, but feel free to reach out to us directly at Mayfield. Happy to chat with people and get some more information. But the contacts there for our guests are here as well. And then one thing I did wanted to, I mentioned it earlier. One of the things that we're really excited about, I'm super excited about, is online courses that we have available. So we have these pre-recorded NABCEP accredited NABCEP credit classes that you can take on our website, directly from our website. And we also do in-person classes. So one of the ways that we're trying to address education. So, happy to talk with folks if there's, some education needs. So we have a couple specific courses up right now around codes standards. So would happy to talk with people about that. And then finally, next month, I always wanted to just, do our next AMA. We are going to be talking about software and some of the potentials around using software at different aspects of installations projects. So hope you all join us next month. So I really appreciate the panel's time, Caro, Dirk, Richard. It's been great having you. I know that if this is something that you all take very seriously, I'm passionate about, and so I appreciate you taking the time today, talk with us, and yeah, I appreciate it very much. I hope you all have a great day.
You too, Ryan. Thank you. Thanks, Dirk, Rich.
Thanks for having us, Ryan.
Thank you.